Hashtag flipping houses, the reality behind the TV shows you've seen it 100 times. A couple walks through a rundown property, cracks a few jokes about the ugly wallpaper, swings some sledgehammers during a satisfying demo day, and then 30 minutes later, they're standing in a beautifully renovated home that sold for a $50,000 profit. It looks easy. It looks fun. It looks like the fastest path to financial freedom you've ever seen. But here's the truth that those shows will never tell you. For every success story you watch on television, there are dozens of investors who lost money, lost sleep, and sometimes lost everything. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on house flipping, the real numbers, the real risks, and what you actually need to know before you ever make an offer. House flipping has existed as a real estate strategy for decades, but it exploded into mainstream culture in the early 2000s when networks like HGTV and A&E discovered that renovation drama made for incredibly compelling television. Shows like Flip This House, Property Brothers, and Fixer Upper turned ordinary investors and designers into household names. Audiences were hooked. The format was irresistible: transformation, conflict, big reveals, and profit. By the mid-2010s, the genre had spawned dozens of spin-offs and imitators, and millions of viewers started asking themselves the same dangerous question: why can't I do that? The problem is that television, by its very nature, compresses reality. A renovation that takes 4 months gets edited into 22 minutes. Budget overruns get glossed over or left out entirely. The weeks of contractor no-shows, permit delays, unexpected structural issues, and carrying costs simply don't make for good television. What you see is a highlight reel. What actually happens in the field is an entirely different story, and understanding that difference could save you from making a very expensive mistake. Let's start with the numbers, because the numbers tell a story that TV never bothers to tell. According to Atom Data Solutions, a leading real estate data company, the average gross profit on a flipped home in the United States hovers around $45,000 per transaction. That sounds impressive until you understand what gross profit actually means. Gross profit is simply the difference between the purchase price and the sale price. It does not account for renovation costs, financing costs, agent commissions, closing costs, holding costs, or taxes. When all of those expenses are subtracted, the average net profit on a house flip drops dramatically, often to somewhere between $15,000 and $25,000, assuming everything goes reasonably well. Now consider what it costs to get there. A typical house flip requires significant capital up front. Purchase costs, including down payment and closing fees, often run into the 6-figure range in most markets. Renovation budgets on a moderate flip typically range from $30,000 to $80,000, and experienced investors will tell you that you should always budget an additional 15 to 20% for unexpected costs, because unexpected costs are not the exception. They are the rule. Knob and tube wiring hiding behind finished walls. A foundation crack that wasn't visible during inspection. Plumbing that looked functional but failed pressure testing. These surprises happen constantly, and they erode your profit margin every single time. Financing adds another layer of cost that TV completely ignores. Most house flippers don't use their own cash. They rely on hard money loans, private lending, or renovation-specific financing products. Hard money loans, which are the most common form of short-term real estate financing, typically carry interest rates between 8 and 15% annually, along with origination points and fees. On a flip that takes 6 months to complete and sell, the financing costs alone can represent several $1,000s in pure interest. Expense. Every week the project runs long, that number grows. Then there's the question of time, which is perhaps the most underestimated cost in the entire equation. Television flips appear to happen in a matter of weeks. Real flips almost never do. From offer acceptance to sale closing, the average house flip takes between 4 and 8 months, and complex renovations can stretch well beyond that. During every single one of those months, you are paying interest on your loan, paying property taxes, paying insurance, and potentially paying utilities to keep the property functional during construction. These holding costs accumulate quietly in the background, and many first-time flippers forget to account for them until they're staring at a final profit and loss statement that looks nothing like what they expected. The renovation process itself is where most first-time flippers encounter their biggest surprises. On television, contractors show up on time, work efficiently, and complete tasks beautifully under budget. In reality, the construction industry is plagued by labor shortages, scheduling conflicts, and quality control issues that can turn a simple kitchen renovation into a months-long ordeal. getting multiple bids, verifying licenses and insurance, checking references, and establishing clear contractual timelines are all essential steps that shows never have time to demonstrate. A bad contractor relationship doesn't just cost you money. It can derail your entire project timeline and, by extension, your entire financial projection. Permits are another reality that television conveniently skips. In most jurisdictions, structural changes, electrical work, plumbing modifications, and additions all require permits, inspections, and approvals from local building departments. Permit timelines vary wildly by municipality, some take 2 weeks, others take 4 months. Skipping permits to save time is a strategy some flippers consider, but it creates serious legal exposure and can make the property difficult or impossible to sell to buyers using conventional financing. Any buyer's home inspector will likely flag unpermitted work, which puts you back at the negotiating table or forces you to remediate the work properly before closing. Let's also talk about what happens after the renovation is complete, because the sale itself introduces another set of variables that TV glosses over. Flippers are subject to real estate agent commissions on both the buy side and the sell side, typically totaling 5 to 6% of the sale price. On a $300,000 home, that's $15,000 to $18,000 in commission alone. Add seller closing costs of another 1 to 2%, and you've given up another $6,000 before you even calculate your renovation expenses. There's also the matter of market timing. The housing market is not static. It responds to interest rates, economic sentiment, seasonal demand, and local inventory levels. Investors who purchased properties in late 2021 and carried them through 2022 and into 2023 discovered this the hard way, as rising interest rates cooled buyer demand and compressed sale prices in many markets across the country. A flip that penciled out beautifully at purchase can become a money-losing proposition if the market shifts during your renovation window. This is a risk that no television show ever seriously addresses, because admitting market risk would undermine the entire narrative of easy, reliable profit. Tax implications are equally important and equally ignored on television. Short-term capital gains, profits from assets held for less than 1 year, are taxed as ordinary income in the United States. For a successful flipper earning meaningful profit, this can mean a tax rate of 22%, 24%, or higher, depending on total income. Some active flippers who are considered to be running a real estate business by the IRS face self-employment taxes on top of that. The tax bill on a $30,000 net profit could reduce your actual take-home gain to somewhere around $18,000 to $20,000. Spread that across the 6 months of risk, capital deployment, and active management required to execute a flip, and the return per hour of effort can be surprisingly modest. None of this means house flipping is impossible or that it can't be profitable. It absolutely can be, and thousands of experienced investors do generate meaningful income through disciplined, systematic flipping. But the key word is disciplined. Successful flippers don't buy with emotion. They run detailed pro forma spreadsheets before making any offer. They use the 70% rule as a basic valuation guide, meaning they pay no more than 70% of the after-repair value, minus estimated renovation costs. They build relationships with reliable contractors over multiple projects.